Have you ever wondered why life sometimes feels like an unsolvable puzzle? Why do the dreams we build crumble like sandcastles? Why do those we love suffer? Why does pain knock on our door even when we try to live the best way possible? This is the most extraordinary story ever told about suffering and purpose. A story that has changed the lives of millions of people over nearly 2,000 years. A story that can change your life today at this very moment as you're hearing these words. Imagine for just a moment. What if I told you there's an architect working behind the scenes of your life? Someone who takes every broken piece, every tear shed, every shattered dream, and uses them as raw materials to build something extraordinary? What if every storm you've faced wasn't a cosmic accident, but part of a masterful design? Today you're going to discover a truth that can completely transform how you see suffering, purpose, and the meaning of your existence. A truth so powerful that it gave strength to martyrs at the stake, hope to prisoners in dark cells, and peace to broken hearts throughout history. This is the story of the most perfect plan ever conceived. And you are part of it. The greatest treatise of hope. There exists a document that changed the course of humanity. It wasn't written in golden palaces or prestigious universities. It was written by a man who knew intimately both success and failure, both glory and prison. Imagine a brilliant man, educated in the finest schools of his time, who one day had his life completely turned upside down. A man who planned a successful and prestigious career, but ended up spending years in damp and dark prisons. This man wrote a letter. A letter that would become the greatest theological treatise ever produced. A letter that would answer the deepest questions of the human soul about suffering, purpose, and destiny. But why is this letter so special? Because it wasn't written by someone who lived a sheltered life in ivory towers. It was written by someone who experienced firsthand the betrayal of friends, the injustice of systems, the pain of losses, and yet discovered a secret that transformed his perspective forever. The secret of the divine architect. This letter reveals a magnificent structure of God's plan for humanity. Like a well-designed building, it has foundations, pillars, and a climactic point. And it's exactly at this climactic point in the 8th chapter that we find one of the most revolutionary promises ever made to humanity. A promise that challenges everything we think about suffering. The anatomy of human suffering. Before we discover this revolutionary promise, we need to be honest about the reality of pain. Have you ever woken up in the middle of the night with your heart heavy, wondering, why me? Have you ever felt that sensation that life is falling apart around you and you can't find a reason, an explanation, a light at the end of the tunnel? If you answered yes, you're not alone. In fact, you're in good company. Some of the greatest heroes in human history asked exactly the same questions. Men and women who changed the world, who inspired generations, who built civilizations, all of them went through dark valleys where they questioned the meaning of everything. Why do you think suffering is such a universal experience? Think about it. Doesn't matter your age, your nationality, your social status, or your beliefs, we all face moments where life doesn't seem to make sense. Where the plans we made are shattered. Where people we trusted disappoint us. Where our bodies fail us. Where our dreams turn into nightmares. But what if I told you there's a purpose even in the most inexplicable pain? What if suffering isn't the end of the story, but the means through which something extraordinary is being built? This isn't cheap philosophy to make you feel better. This is a truth tested by millennia of human experience. A truth discovered by people who went through the most terrible personal hells and emerged on the other side transformed. The conviction that defies circumstances. We know. 2 simple words that carry the weight of an inner revolution. But what kind of knowledge is this? Is it knowledge you get from reading books? Watching videos? Listening to motivational speeches? No. This is a very different kind of knowledge. Imagine an experienced pilot flying through a violent storm. While passengers are panicking, he remains calm. What? Because he hasn't just studied storms, he's flown through dozens of them. He knows, from his own experience, that his aircraft was designed to withstand much more than this turbulence can offer. That's the kind of knowledge we're talking about. It's the conviction born not from theory but from experience. It's knowing that even when circumstances are completely out of your control, they're still rigorously under the control of someone greater. Think for a moment, how many times have your plans already been frustrated? How many times have you had to take a completely different path than you had planned? And how many times, looking back, could you see that detour was actually the best thing that could have happened? This is the signature of the divine architect. Consider the story of a young man who was sold as a slave by his own brothers. Absolute injustice, family betrayal, destroyed dreams, years of humiliation and suffering. Any normal person would become bitter, revolted, emotionally destroyed. But this young man discovered something extraordinary. Years later, when he found himself face to face with those who had betrayed him, he said something that forever changed our understanding of suffering. "You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good." How is it possible to transform evil into good? How is it possible that betrayal becomes the path to redemption? How is it possible that injustice becomes the instrument of justice? Because there's an architect working behind the scenes. The optimism that transcends reality. All things work together. Wait a minute. All things? Does this include that betrayal that broke your heart? That illness that changed all your plans? That financial loss that brought down your dreams? That death that left an impossible void to fill? Yes. But pay attention, this doesn't mean that all these things are good in themselves. It would be a cruel lie to say that betrayal is good, that illness is good, that death is good. What it means is something much deeper and more revolutionary. There exists a power so extraordinary and a wisdom so infinite that it can take even the most devastating circumstances and use them as instruments to produce something beautiful. Let me tell you a story that will illustrate this perfectly. A boy was playing with his paper boat at the edge of a lake. He loved that little boat. He had made it with his own hands, colored it with his favorite crayons. It was his treasure. Suddenly, an unexpected wave took the boat away from the shore. The boy began to cry desperately. A man approached and, to the boy's horror, began throwing stones toward the boat. "Stop. You're going to hurt my boat," the boy screamed. But the man kept throwing stones, always close to the boat but without hitting it. Then something magical happened. The waves created by the stones began to gently push the boat back toward the shore, right into the boy's anxious hands. "See," said the man with a smile, "sometimes the stones we think are going to hurt us are exactly what we need to bring us back home." How many stones in your life did you think would destroy you, but were actually the waves that brought you closer to your true destiny? How many doors that closed in your face were actually redirections to something much better? How many times did you think, "This is the end," when it was actually just the beginning of an extraordinary new chapter? The hidden purpose behind pain. But for what good exactly do all these things work together? This is perhaps the most important question any human being can ask. What is the final purpose? What is the project being built through all these experiences, good and bad? The answer will surprise you. It's not wealth. It's not fame. It's not perfect health or a problem-free life. It's not even happiness in the sense we normally understand it. The purpose is much deeper and more transformative. Imagine a goldsmith working with raw gold. He takes that metal full of impurities and puts it in the fire. The gold resists, but the goldsmith knows exactly what he's doing. He controls the temperature, the time, every aspect of the process. And how does he know when the gold is pure? When he can see his own reflection in the molten metal. This is one of the most powerful images of what God is doing in your life. He is working through every joy and every pain, every victory and every failure, every moment of light and every dark night, to remove the impurities that prevent you from reflecting His own image. The great project isn't to make you rich or famous. The great project is to make you like the most extraordinary person who ever existed. It's to polish, refine, chisel your personality until it reflects perfect beauty, goodness, love, and wisdom. But why does this require suffering? Why can't it be an easy and painless process? Because the greatest transformations always require pressure. The diamond only forms under extreme pressure. Gold only reveals its purity in fire. The butterfly only emerges through the struggle to leave the cocoon. And you are being transformed into a masterpiece. When adversity becomes an instrument. Let me tell you about a man who understood this extraordinarily. He was a preacher in 17th century England. His only crime was speaking about his faith in public places. The authorities gave him a simple choice: stop preaching and you'll be free. Continue preaching and you'll go to prison. What would you do? This man chose prison. He was incarcerated for 14 long years. 14 years away from family, away from freedom, away from everything he loved. Sounds like a tragedy, doesn't it? Sounds like a terrible waste of a life that could have done much good in the world. But there was an architect working even in that dark cell. It was in that prison, in that place of apparent defeat and failure, that he wrote a book. A book that would become possibly the most widely read work of humanity after the Holy Scriptures. A book that has comforted broken hearts, inspired desperate people, and changed lives for over 300 years. Millions of people have found hope through the words written in that cell. Think about it. If that man hadn't gone to prison, if he had chosen freedom and comfort, millions of people would never have been touched by his work. The tragedy of his imprisonment became the instrument of redemption for countless generations. What if your greatest current difficulty isn't an accident, but the instrument through which something extraordinary is being prepared? What if what you consider your greatest failure is actually the raw material for your greatest triumph? What if what you call an end, God calls a beginning? This isn't fantasy or empty positive thinking. This is a truth tested by thousands of people throughout history, real people who went through real suffering and discovered that there was a greater purpose being executed through their pain. The privilege of an exclusive promise. But wait, there's something crucial we need to understand about this extraordinary promise. It's not universal. It doesn't apply to all people indiscriminately. This promise has a specific address, a particular recipient. To those who love God, to those who are called according to His purpose. What does this mean for you today? It means there's a fundamental difference between those who live recognizing the existence of a greater purpose and those who believe life is just a random sequence of meaningless events. For those who don't recognize the hand of the divine architect, life follows a simple law: whoever sows wind reaps storm. The natural consequences of choices unfold without the intervention of a higher wisdom that can transform evil into good. But for you who love God, for you who recognize there's a purpose greater than your own plans, for you who understand there's an architect working behind the scenes of your life, for you, He becomes the divine weaver, threading each strand of your existence into a perfect work of art. Let me illustrate this with an image that can change your perspective forever. Imagine a young woman doing hand embroidery. Someone approaches and sees the work from underneath, the reverse side. What do they see? Loose threads, knots, apparent disorganization, something that looks ugly and purposeless. What terrible work, someone seeing only the reverse side might say. But then the young woman turns the embroidery over. From the right side, there's a beautiful, harmonious image, every thread perfectly positioned to create something beautiful and meaningful. This is the difference in perspective that changes everything. When you're in the middle of pain, confusion, uncertainty, you're seeing your life from the reverse side. You see only the loose threads, the knots, the apparent disharmonies. But there's a divine weaver working from the other side, creating something magnificently beautiful. And you know what's the difference between seeing from the reverse side and seeing from the right side? The difference lies in recognizing that there's an artist working, even when you can't see the final result. A child's trust. There's a simple story that perfectly illustrates the heart of this life-transforming faith. A boy was running down the street hugging a package wrapped in simple paper. His face radiated contagious joy, a smile that lit up everything around him. A curious adult stopped him. "What do you have there that makes you so happy?" "It's something very good," replied the boy, clutching the package to his chest. But what is it? The adult insisted. I don't know, said the boy, still smiling. How do you know it's good if you don't know what it is? And then came the answer that defines the heart of mature faith. Because my Father gave it to me. This is the essence of trust that transforms lives. It's not faith based on understanding every detail. It's not faith that demands complete explanations before trusting. It's faith based on the character of the one who's in control. How many times have you tried to decipher every aspect of what was happening in your life before having peace? How many nights have you stayed awake trying to understand the why of every difficult circumstance? What if peace doesn't come through complete understanding, but through trust in the Father's character? What if you could rest in the fact that, even not knowing what's in the package of your current circumstances, you can be sure it's something good because it comes from the hands of a perfectly loving and infinitely wise Father? This isn't blind or naive faith. This is faith informed by the character of the one we trust. It's like a child who can sleep peacefully during a storm because he knows his father is driving the car. The sculptor who never gives up. There's a fundamental difference between human artists and the divine artist. The greatest artists in history left unfinished works. Projects started with great enthusiasm, but abandoned when difficulties became too great, when inspiration ran out, or when other more attractive projects appeared. The famous sculptor Michelangelo, for example, of the many works he began, completed only 14. There are blocks of marble around the world that bear his mark, but that remained forever unfinished, eternal testimonies of abandoned projects. But our God is not like Michelangelo. What God begins, God finishes. And finishes perfectly. Think of your own life as a block of raw marble. In the hands of a human sculptor, you could be abandoned when the work became too difficult, when imperfection seemed insurmountable, when the project seemed impossible to complete. But you're not in the hands of a human artist. You're in the hands of the divine sculptor who never abandons his work. Every painful blow of adversity's chisel is revealing something magnificent that was hidden within the raw marble of your humanity. Every seemingly destructive strike is actually removing everything that prevents beauty from emerging. And you know what's the most impressive difference? The divine sculptor isn't trying to make you look like an idealized image he has in mind. He's revealing who you really are at your highest potential. When Michelangelo was asked how he created the sculpture of David, he replied, "I didn't create anything. I just removed everything that wasn't David." So it is with your life. God isn't trying to make you become someone you're not. He's removing everything that isn't the truest, purest, most beautiful version of who you were created to be. This means that every current difficulty isn't an accident. It's not a sign that God forgot about you or gave up on you. It's evidence that He's actively working, that He sees something in you worth the entire refining process. The most secure certainty in the world. Everything will work out. If everything hasn't worked out yet, it's because we haven't reached the end yet. This isn't an empty optimistic statement or superficial positive thinking. This is a declaration based on the most solid foundation that exists, the unbreakable nature of God's character. But how can we be so certain? The answer lies in the divine architecture of salvation, a golden chain forged in eternity, with links so strong that not even the forces of hell can break them. Imagine a chain suspending something precious over an abyss. If any link breaks, everything is lost. But if each link is forged from indestructible material and connected perfectly to the others, then what's being sustained is absolutely secure. This is the image of your spiritual security. Your life is suspended not by a human chain, fragile and prone to breaking, but by a divine chain forged before the foundation of the world. And what are these indestructible links? The first link, the choice before time. Those God foreknew He also predestined. There's something that happened before you were born, before your first breath, before your first thought, that completely determined the final outcome of your life. We're not talking about destiny in a fatalistic sense. We're talking about something much deeper and more personal. Imagine you're watching a movie for the second time. The first time you were anxious during the danger scenes, worried about the character's fate. But the second time you watch relaxed because you already know how it ends. You know the heroes will survive, that good will triumph, that everything will end well. For God, your entire life is like watching a movie for the second time. He's already seen the ending. He already knows how your story ends. And that's why He can remain at peace even when you're going through the tensest and most difficult scenes. But there's something even more extraordinary about this. Choice wasn't based on a prediction of your future merits. God didn't look through the tunnel of time, see that you would be a good person, and then decide to choose you. The choice was much more radical than that. He chose you before you did anything good or bad. He chose you not because of what you would do, but despite what you would do. He chose you so that you would become the kind of person He knew you could be. Do you know what this means for you today? It means your identity isn't based on your achievements or failures. It's not based on other people's approval or your ability to meet expectations. Your identity is based on a decision made about you before time existed. You are loved not for what you've done, but for who you are in the eyes of the one who knows you better than you know yourself. The second link, the call that reaches the heart. And those He predestined, He also called. Have you ever had those moments in life where something suddenly clicked? Moments where a truth you had heard 1,000 times before suddenly penetrated your heart in a completely new way? That wasn't an accident. There's a difference between hearing a message with your ears and receiving it in your heart. Millions of people can hear the same words, but only some experience that transformative moment where truth stops being just information and becomes personal revelation. Let me tell you about a young man who experienced this. He had left a church where he heard a message about total surrender of life to God. It was a message he had heard many times before. He got home and turned on the music, started dancing, trying to distract himself from the restlessness he felt in his heart. Then something extraordinary happened. In the middle of the music, that voice he had heard in church began to buzz in his ear. "This is all wrong. You have no peace in this." He stopped the music immediately, knelt right there and said, "Lord, I am yours." What happened in that moment? The difference between external calling and internal calling happened. External calling is the message everyone hears. Internal calling is when that message is personalized by God's own Spirit and applied directly to your heart. And you know what's most impressive about internal calling? It never fails. When God speaks directly to your heart, there's no force in the universe that can resist. This means that if you're feeling a holy restlessness, a desire for change, a hunger for something deeper and more meaningful, this isn't coincidence. This may very well be God's internal call touching your heart at this exact moment. The third link, the verdict that changes everything. And those He called, He also justified. Imagine you're being judged in the most important court in the universe. All your failures, mistakes, impure thoughts, inappropriate words, selfish actions, everything is being presented as evidence against you. The case is undeniable. The evidence is overwhelming. You are clearly guilty. But then something extraordinary happens. The judge, who is also your father, does two simultaneous things that completely change the outcome of the trial. First, He takes all the debt of your sin, a debt so large you could never pay it, and transfers it to His own Son. The debt is completely paid. Total forgiveness. But He doesn't stop there. Second, He goes to your spiritual account and makes a deposit. Not just any deposit, but a deposit of infinite value. All the perfection, all the goodness, all the righteousness of Christ is credited to your account. The result? You don't leave the courtroom just forgiven. You leave declared perfectly righteous. This is the difference between forgiveness and justification. Forgiveness is when a debt is canceled, but you remain at zero. Justification is when the debt is canceled and you receive an infinite positive balance. Do you know what this means practically? It means that when the accuser, that voice in your mind that constantly reminds you of your failures, tries to bring charges against you, there's a definitive answer. Who can bring charges against God's elect? It is God who justifies. There's no higher court to appeal to. The supreme judge of the universe has already decided in your favor. The case is closed. This should free you from the whip of guilt that may have dominated your life for years. You no longer need to live striving to be good enough for God. You've already been declared perfectly righteous through what Christ did for you. The fourth link, the future that's already reality. And those he justified, he also glorified. Notice something extraordinary in this sentence. All the other verbs make chronological sense. Predestined happened in the eternal past. Called happened when you believed. Justified happened at the moment of your faith. But glorified? That's a future event. It will happen when Christ returns. Why is it in the past tense? Because in God's mind, it's a done deal. It's like a train that has already left the station with a guaranteed destination. Even though it hasn't arrived at the final destination yet, the outcome is certain. Passengers can rest during the journey because they know they'll reach the destination. This means your future glorification is as certain as your past justification. Think about the security this offers. You're not on an uncertain spiritual journey where you may or may not reach the final destination. You're on a journey where the outcome has already been guaranteed by God Himself. This is the basis of the famous truth, once saved, always saved. But wait, someone might object. If salvation is guaranteed, doesn't this lead people to live carelessly without concern for holiness? The answer is surprising. If a person thinks this way, it's a sign they were never truly transformed. Because when God saves someone, He doesn't save the person in their sin, He saves the person from their sin. True salvation always produces transformation. Not salvation through transformation, but transformation through salvation. More than conquerors. We've come to the end of this extraordinary journey through God's perfect plan. But before we finish, there's a question that needs to be asked. After everything we've discovered about this majestic plan, about this life-transforming promise, about this unshakable security, what difference does this make on Monday morning? What difference does it make when you wake up and have to face that difficult situation at work? When you need to deal with that complicated relationship? When you receive worrying medical news? When your financial plans crumble? The difference is absolutely revolutionary. Instead of living as a victim of circumstances, you can live as a collaborator with the divine architect. Instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" you can ask, "What is God building through this?" Instead of despairing when plans don't work out, you can rest in the certainty that there's a greater plan in operation. A plan that never fails, is never frustrated, never needs course corrections. Instead of measuring your worth by your successes and failures, you can find your identity in the choice God made for you before the foundation of the world. And instead of living in fear of the future, you can live with the confidence of someone who already knows the end of the story. But perhaps the deepest transformation is this. You can finally stop trying to be the architect of your own life and rest in the fact that you're in the hands of the perfect architect. If God is for you, who can be against you? If He didn't spare His own Son, how will He not graciously give you all things? Who can bring any charge against you if it's God Himself who justifies you? Who can condemn you if it's Christ who died for you, rose again, and now intercedes for you at the Father's right hand? What can separate you from God's love? Trouble? Hardship? Persecution? Famine? Nakedness? Danger? Sword? The answer echoes through the centuries. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. Neither death nor life, neither angels nor demons, neither the present nor the future, nor any powers, neither height nor depth, nor anything else in all creation will be able to separate you from the love of God that is in Christ Jesus. This is your inheritance. This is your identity. This is your security. You are not just a conqueror, you are more than a conqueror through Him who loved you. And that changes everything. Because when you know who you are, when you know where you come from, when you know where you're going, when you know who's in control, you can face any storm with peace. You can walk through any valley with hope. You can endure any pain with purpose. Because you know the divine architect is working. And He never, ever gives up on his masterpiece. And that masterpiece is you.